All right, Ms. Acorn.
Can you please state and spell your name for the record?
It's Timothy Bledsoe, Timothy, Bledsoe, Bledsoe.
And you're retired now, is that correct?
That's correct.
How were you previously employed?
I was employed by the West Virginia State Police as a West Virginia State Trooper from September of 1994 until April of 2022.
And are you still involved with West Virginia State Police at all?
Yes.
How so?
Prior to my retirement, I was asked by the staff at the West Virginia State Police Academy to periodically do a presentation to the training classes that are put on there for cadet training and basic officer training, and I do that from time to time as they schedule that.
During the course of your employment with the West Virginia State Police, did you have occasion to investigate a Natalie Cochran?
Yes, I did.
And is that the same Natalie Cochran that's on trial today?
That's correct. And she's seated here at defense counsel table with her co-counsel, Mr. Victor and Mr. Selden.
Your Honor, could the record please reflect that the witness has identified the defendant?
It shall so reflect.
Thank you. What did you investigate her for?
Initially, the investigation centered around a potential financial crimes, and then as we continued that investigation, we also investigated the death of Michael Cochran.
Your Honor, I'm retrieving what's been marked as State's Exhibit 1. I would request permission to approach the witness.
Yes, you may do so.
Can I see that for a second, please?
Were you present at the time that the events in State's Exhibit 1 occurred?
Yes, I was.
And have you reviewed State's Exhibit 1?
Yes.
Can you identify for us what that is?
Yes, this is the plea agreement signed and carried out in the district court for the Southern District of West Virginia, in which the defendant pled guilty.
I'm going to object this entire line of questioning. We're not retrying here the federal case.
Your Honor, this is simply a line of questioning to introduce the federal document of which the court has taken judicial notice into evidence.
For what relevancy?
It is relevant because it's going to prove that Michael Cochran did not know what was going on in the defendant's Ponzi scheme.
That document has nothing to do with Michael Cochran.
The stipulation of facts that is reflected in that document does not mention Michael Cochran, which goes to show that he did not know what was going on.
I'll overrule the objection. I'll permit it, and I'll reserve your exception, Mr. Victor. Go ahead. You may rephrase or re-ask the question, please, Ms. Aker.
I believe I asked you to identify State's Exhibit 1.
Yes, this is the plea agreement which was signed by the defendant involving the financial crimes in which she was charged in the federal court for the Southern District of West Virginia, and she pled guilty.
And does that document accurately reflect the events as you recall them?
Yes, it does.
In that document, is there a stipulation of facts signed by the defendant?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, is Michael Cochran mentioned anywhere in that stipulation of facts?
No, he is not.
Your Honor, at this time I would ask to move State's Exhibit 1 into evidence.
I'm going to object on the same grounds that I objected before, the relevancy.
Have we dealt with State's Exhibit 1 already? It has not been admitted?
No, sir.
Okay. I'm going to admit it over objection. I'll preserve the defense objection and exception to the document.
Thank you, Your Honor. Lieutenant Bledsoe, can you please tell us what you know about Michael Cochran?
He was 38 years old at the time of his death. He was married to the defendant. They shared a home here in Raleigh County in the Daniels area. I had 2 children together. I never met Michael Cochran personally, but through investigation and I think.
So I'm going to object based on lack of personal knowledge.
Your Honor, his personal knowledge was gained through his investigation.
Well, which is based probably on hearsay, and again, lack of personal knowledge.
Overruled. You may continue, please.
And through the investigation, we learned that Michael Cochran was someone who was very conscious of his physical fitness. He was into working out, possibly bodybuilding, and also was very conscious of his standing and reputation in the local community.
Was there any point in your investigation, I'll rephrase, did it ever appear to you as though Michael was questioning the legitimacy of Tactical Solutions Group?
That is a leading question. I object to that.
I think I have to sustain that objection.
You obtained a search warrant for the defendant's phone, is that correct?
That's correct.
And in reviewing that telephone, were there any text messages that caught your attention at any point?
Yes, numerous ones, particularly around late September of 2018, the text messages that we were reviewing as part of our investigation at that time.
Your Honor, I'm asking for 3 exhibits to be marked at this time that have been reviewed by the defense.
All right.
Lieutenant Bledsoe, would you please identify the parties in these text messages on the screen?
The 304-228-1321, that would be
Your Honor, could you speak into the microphone? I can't really hear him.
Okay.
sorry.
No problem.
The 1-304-228-1321 telephone number is identified as being the cellular phone number for the defendant, and the one titled Uncle Buster, I believe that was the uncle of the defendant, Charles Hawley.
And there were several text messages along these same lines, is that correct?
That's correct.
What about these text messages stands out to you?
The first text message is from the defendant to Uncle Buster. It says, "Good evening. After all your contracts pay out, I won't be able to invest them anymore. I will cut your checks as soon as they come in. I am very sorry. I wasn't transparent with Michael on all the contracts we had in the works." That's one of many demonstrations throughout the text message.
I'm going to object. But
Sustained. That was unresponsive.
Could I
Yes, you can follow up with the
move
question.
to strike, Your Honor, that last answer.
Yes, I'll grant that. Ladies and gentlemen, disregard the last attempt to explain.
Lieutenant Bledsoe, why does that text message stand out to you?
Because the defendant is obviously communicating that she was not transparent with Michael about aspects of the business.
Well, these text messages are across a couple of pages, but did you identify the parties in these messages as well?
Yes, again, this is a defendant's phone, and it appears to be communications with her sister, Penny Carrico, who I believe has since been married and is now maybe Penny Lowry.
I'm just moving on to the same conversation to the top of the next page. Why does that text message stand out to you?
For the same reasons I stated on the previous, it's a very similar in context and has the same wording that Michael and I should have been, excuse me, details with Michael, and I should have been completely transparent with him. That's similar to the previous text.
I don't think the jury can read these texts. Can you, members of the jury?
Working on it.
Okay.
Get the T until you can read.
Maybe you could assist Deputy Fry. We need to focus in.
Yeah, turn that light. Okay.
If I bring down the house lights, does that help at all or make it worse? Is that better? Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, I'm gonna take that one away now. Doing my best to get it all on there. And finally, Lieutenant Bledsoe, could you please identify the parties in these text messages?
Again, yes, that's the defendant's cell phone number, and also identified as, the other phone number is identified as Wendy Poteet, which is the sister of the defendant.
What happened in September of 2018?
From our investigation, we learned that, and these texts are an example of how we learned that Michael Cochran discovered that there were aspects of the business, particularly related to the purchase or investment into contracts and the amount of money that investors were investing versus what he believed, what he had been told by the defendant. And more importantly, the promised return was much larger to those individuals than he had previously believed. And he was extremely upset by that.
Lieutenant Bledsoe, could you please identify the parties in these text messages?
Yes, that's communication by cell phone between the defendant and Michael Cochran.
Can you see this, members of the jury? Okay.
What to you is the significance of these text messages?
The defendant appears to be relaying to Mr. Cochran.
Well, I'm sorry, Your Honor, if it appears to be, then the witness is speculating.
Sustained. You can rephrase, please, Ms. Aker.
What about these text messages was pertinent to your investigation?
Based on our investigation and reviewing these text messages, they are reflecting amounts, large amounts of money that are being presented to Michael Cochran in the context that they will be being paid to their business as part of their contracts with the federal government.
And are these the same parties as the previous text messages?
Yes.
What about Michael's response is significant to your investigation, if anything?
Yes, based on our investigation and again reviewing these texts, he was, and based on the information that I testified previously about what he had found out, he was trying to find out.
Your Honor, the witness is speculating. The witness is stating something based on hearsay. I object to this.
Well, I think it's based on his investigation, and I think it's proper. I'll allow it. You may continue, sir.
Judge, may we approach on that?
Sure.
Lieutenant Bledsoe, how did you become involved in this investigation?
It was brought to my attention by Mr. Heinzman.
And what exactly was brought to your attention?
He had received information from one of the troopers at the Beckley Detachment, Sergeant Alan Marsh, and that information indicated that there was potentially financial crimes or a crime or crimes being committed by the defendant.
And what steps did you undertake to begin your investigation?
A wide array of things, just gaining all the background information that we could. Some of it was, obtained through open source. The business had a website that we were able to look into. But at the same time, doing an investigation of that nature, it's important to, especially if it's something that you believe is still ongoing, you want to make sure that you don't, tip your hand. And so we tried to be as covert as possible in exploring the information into the financial crimes. and we were able to,
You know, I'm going to object. This is non-responsive. It's we. The question was, what did you do? Because I don't want any answers based on hearsay.
Okay, Lieutenant Bledsoe, if you'd confine your answer and testimony to the activities that you engaged in yourself.
yes, sir.
You can continue if you can phrase it within yourself.
Yes, I participated in the investigation in that. I was a participant in assisting in obtaining grand jury subpoenas to obtain documentation, interviewing witnesses, potential witnesses, and just the collection of any and all known documentation or information that we could possibly find related to the allegation.
And just so we're clear, financial crimes were not the only allegation that you investigated, right?
At the beginning, yes, it was, but as the financial crime investigation continued, then I also was involved in investigating the death of Michael Cochran.
And in investigating the death of Michael Cochran, what steps did you personally undertake?
Very similar to what I stated earlier, and also met with the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner for West Virginia once I learned that Mr. Cochran had not underwent autopsy upon his death.
Did you conduct interviews during the murder investigation?
Yes.
Did you obtain search warrants?
There was a search warrant obtained, but the basis for that affidavit was based on the investigation of the financial crimes.
Were you ever aware of an audit on the Cochrans?
No.
Were you aware of allegations of an audit?
Yes.
And by whom were those allegations made?
The defendant.
Your Honor, I'd ask this be marked as State's Exhibit number 27, Your Honor.
Very well.
Now, as far as this is concerned, I only want to focus on this text message. Who is this text message coming from?
The defendant. Excuse me.
So, did you ever uncover any evidence that an audit occurred?
Absolutely not.
What was the audit used as an excuse for?
For the delay in repaying investors or the business.
I'm going to object. We're back to money laundering trouble.
Your Honor, the point of this is to prove that Mr. Cochran...
Wait a minute, you all are talking at the same time.
Yes,
Let me hear from Mr. Victor first. Go ahead.
The answer and the question. The question and the answer suggested the same thing that the court has sustained the objection to already. That is, we're retrying the financial case. And we should, and calling for all kinds of speculation, and we don't need to do this. This has nothing to do with murder trial. This is irrelevant.
Now, Ms. Akers.
Your Honor, the purpose of this and the relevance is to prove the state's motive, which is that Michael Cochran did not know that a Ponzi scheme was being run, and that is why we report that the defendant killed him.
I'll allow it. The objection's overruled. Continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Lieutenant Bledsoe, are you aware of anyone by the name of Betsy Whitland?
I'm familiar with that name, yes.
Can you tell us who she is?
No, I cannot.
And why is that?
Because through this investigation, I learned that that person, the way that it was being presented, was not actually a real person, or employed in the manner in which it was also being portrayed, or she was also being portrayed to be employed.
Now, was she ever mentioned in the defendant's communications with anyone?
Yes, numerous times.
And who was she purported to be by the defendant?
An employee with the Defense Finance Accounting Services, which was commonly seen throughout documentation reviewed in this investigation as DFAS.
What does DFAS stand for?
Defense Finance Accounting Service, I believe.
What's the significance of the government shutdown that began in December of 2018?
It was a legitimate government shutdown, as most of you may remember, but it also provided that the business of the defendant was not able to provided an excuse as to why the business could not do government contract work or receive payment from the government for contract services.
And do you recall learning of an incident that occurred with Michael at BB&T during that month?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Through the investigation and interview of witnesses, I learned that Michael Cochran had.
Again, it's based on hearsay and some third-party statement, Judge.
No, I don't think so. I'm going to allow it. The objection's overruled. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I learned that the Cochrans were sent a letter by BB&T Bank here in Beckley, and the nature of that correspondence was to inform them that their bank accounts with BB&T were going to be closed. And in response to that, Mr. Cochran went to BB&T Bank personally and was very irate, very upset, to the point that his close friend, Chris Davis, had to be summoned to the bank to calm him down.
I'm going to object to any characterizations of irate and that the witness is speculating at this point. The witness doesn't
Overruled.
know.
I'll allow it. Pose another question, please, Ms. Akron.
Yes, Your Honor. Through your investigation, what was your understanding of the status of the Bank of America account as of the morning of February 6th?
that it was zero balance and that there was no information to suggest that any funding or funds were going to be coming into that account in the future.
And the Cochrans were going to do some work on that account that morning, right?
That is my understanding from this what I learned from this investigation, yes.
We've heard a lot of talk about Michael allegedly using supplements and possibly even steroids. Did you ever locate any evidence to confirm steroid use?
No, it did not.
And we previously introduced a bottle with the FBI labeled enclomiphene citrate. Where did you receive that bottle from?
I recovered that bottle from the residence of Edward and Donna Bolt. Mrs. Bolt is Michael Cochran's mother, and Edward Bolt is his stepfather.
And did the Bolts tell you where they got that bottle from?
Yes, they told me that they were provided that bottle by the defendant after Michael Cochran's death.
Do you have any reason to believe that Michael was suffering from any sort of major medical event leading up to February 6th?
Oh, that calls for medical conclusion. He's not entitled to make that opinion.
Sustained.
I'll withdraw it, Your Honor. From your understanding, what was the general health status of Mr. and Mrs. Cochran the morning of February 6th?
Through the investigation, I learned that the defendant was possibly ill that morning and had sought treatment at the Access.
Why don't the court give me a continuing objection to any of this?
I think that would be appropriate. The court will afford the defense a running objection to all of this testimony, but I'll permit it. I'll preserve the defense exceptions in full. You may continue now, Lieutenant Bledsoe.
Could you ask me that question again, please?
Sure. What was your understanding of the general health status of both Mr. and Mrs. Cochran the morning of February 6th?
Again, my understanding of the condition of Michael Cochran and the defendant that morning is based upon what I learned through this investigation, that the defendant was apparently ill that morning and had went to Access Health Clinic to seek medical treatment. And initially that morning, from the information that I reviewed, Michael Cochran appeared to be well But the information also indicates and supports that over the course of the morning, his physical condition deteriorated.
Did the defendant go to the doctor that morning?
Yes.
Are you aware if Michael went to the doctor that day?
No.
Or that morning, I should say.
No.
Through your investigation, especially of the defendant's phone, did you determine if any medications were received that day?
Yes. It indicated that the defendant was given a shot of promethazine, I believe, and possibly promethazine tablets, which was significant when I saw that.
Why was that significant to you?
I'm going to object to that on the other grounds. He's not a medical expert. He cannot testify to it.
Your Honor, there's no indication that he's testifying to medical expertise until we have his answer.
Well, we don't know what his answer might be, so I'll allow it, and we'll test the waters.
Why was that significant to you?
It was significant because through this investigation, I'd learned that Michael Cochran had was documented to have a severe allergy to promethazine.
What were the Cochrans supposed to do that morning?
It's my understanding through the review of the information in this investigation that the Cochrans had initially scheduled a flight to fly to Virginia, but that flight had been canceled early in the morning on February the 6th.
And why was that flight canceled?
It was my understanding that the flight was canceled due to the defendant's illness.
Were both the defendant and Mr. Cochran home that entire morning?
Not initially, no. They had both been out doing different things at some point that morning.
Where did Michael go?
He had went to Starbucks that morning.
And then he returned home?
Yes, that's my understanding.
What were the Cochrans supposed to do when they took their flight that morning?
As my understanding, they were supposed to meet with Mr. Nexon at the Bank of America.
Now, we previously heard Jennifer Davis testify that she had insulin sent to the defendant's home. Was that your understanding?
Yes.
Why is that important to you?
Well, it's important for a number of reasons. Throughout the investigation, I had not come across any information that anyone in the Cochran residence was diabetic. Also, in an interview that I had conducted with the defendant, she had informed me that Michael Cochran was allegedly using insulin as part of his bodybuilding regimen. And the fact that she had been to Access Health that very morning, and I'm sure could have requested insulin there.
Judge, please, I'm going to object to all of this speculation and all of this commentary on what my client could have said or done. Please, would you instruct the jury to disregard this nonsense?
Yes, the jury is instructed to regard the last part of this witness's response, please.
Do you recall why the defendant needed the insulin that morning?
As I recall from the text messages with Jennifer Davis, it was something to do with some type of medical treatment that she was supposed to be undergoing.
What was that medical treatment for?
I believe it was something related to cancer treatment.
And throughout the entire course of your investigation, did you ever uncover any evidence that the defendant had cancer?
No.
What did you determine happened next that morning in the Cochran household?
At some point, Mr. Cochran suffered a sudden illness, and to the point that he had collapsed in the home.
I object to this, Your Honor, to the display of this inflammatory picture. The witness doesn't know anything about position of the body or the location of the body when this act allegedly happened. I object to it.
I haven't asked him those questions, Your Honor, and I wasn't planning to. I actually would like to know if the witness is familiar with this photograph and who took it.
All right, I'll permit that. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, I am familiar with this photograph, and
I object to the word unfortunately. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I object to any commentary by this officer.
All right, just answer the question, please, Lieutenant Bledsoe.
yes, I'm familiar with that photograph. It was taken by the defendant.
And how do you know it was taken by the defendant?
It was recovered from her cell phone.
Is it your understanding that at that time she was the only other person in the residence? Besides Michael?
Yes.
And you spoke with the defendant several times, is that correct?
That's correct.
What did she tell you happened to Michael that day?
She provided contradictory information about what had happened over the course of 3 separate conversations.
May we approach on this?
Sure.
I objected to the word contradictory, and I will ask the court to, or contradictory statements, and I'll ask the court to instruct the jury to disregard that statement.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, please disregard the witness's last statement pertaining to contradictory statements.
You interviewed the defendant on 3 different occasions, is that correct?
That's correct.
Do you have any recollection of the dates of those interviews?
Yes. I believe the first interview took place on or about April the 8th of 2019. The second interview was on or about May 7th of 2019. And the third was on the following day, May the 8th, 2019.
And did anyone accompany the defendant at any of those interviews?
The first interview was actually done in person with the defendant, and yes, her mother was present. The second and third interviews were done by telephone.
During the first interview, did the defendant tell you or give you her recollection of what happened to Michael the morning of February 6th?
Yes.
Could you elaborate?
Yes. She said that, as I stated earlier, they were in the residence together, and that Mr. Cochran had suddenly went into the kitchen, and she had heard a noise in there. I think she said it was a thud. She gave the time reference in that interview of 10 a.m. that morning. She went into the kitchen, and Mr. Cochran was in the floor, and that she had discovered a bottle of enclomiphene citrate on the kitchen counter when she went into the kitchen.
And did she also provide a recollection of events of February 6th during your second interview?
Yes.
Could you elaborate on that for us?
Yes. At that time, she said that the morning of February 6th, that when she and Michael returned home, that they had sat together for approximately an hour, and that Michael Cochran was doing the best that he had ever done in his life, and that not long after that, he had went into the kitchen, threw up in the sink, and fell and hit his head on the granite countertop and ended up in the floor.
And did she tell you where in the house they were prior to Michael getting up and getting sick?
I believe they were she told me they were in the living room area. And also in that interview, I recall that she stated that she had recovered the bottle of enclomiphene citrate hidden in a cabinet instead of sitting on the kitchen counter as she had previously stated.
And lastly, what was her recollection of events of the morning of February 6th during your third interview with Mrs. Cochran?
During that interview, she indicated that, again, they had gone separate ways that morning and had returned home, and that upon returning home, Mr. Cochran had been sleeping on the couch for approximately 45 minutes to an hour, and that when he awoke shortly after that, he went into the kitchen and had collapsed. And also she introduced that in that interview that Michael Cochran was allegedly using insulin as part of a bodybuilding regimen, and that he readily kept insulin and needles in the home for the purpose of using that in his bodybuilding. I asked her if she had ever injected Michael as part of that to assist him. She indicated that she had not, that he injected himself. And I asked her if he had a common injection site that he preferred to use, and she listed or recited different areas on the body, but the one that stood out to me was she said that his back, or in the back, and that just seemed odd to me.
Now, we know that Michael passed away shortly after that. After he passed away, did TSG continue to operate?
Yes.
And how do you know that?
Through investigation and collection of records and interviewing of witnesses, the business continued, and the defendant continued to try to solicit investors to come into the business. I believe additional investor or two did come into the business.
I'm going to object to this line of questioning. This is post-murder, supposedly. That is irrelevant to this trial.
Your Honor, it's relevant because it proves that Mrs. Cochran was the one that was running the business, not Michael.
Objections overruled.
In addition to that, the defendant had also went to several local high schools in Raleigh County because it was nearing graduation season, and that she had attempted to present scholarships to students who were graduating. And
Judge, I'm going to object to it now. Now we're retrying the financial case again.
Your Honor, my
This has nothing to do with what may have happened months before, weeks before, or months before.
Would you care to respond, Ms. Akron?
Your Honor, my response would still be that this is simply being offered as proof that Michael Cochran was not the one that was running this business. And that is our motive for the defendant killing him.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, but we have never objected to the fact that that my client was part owner of the business. So, and now the alleged victim is dead. So, the business is being run by whoever is left in this business. And so I object on the relevancy of all of that information to the trial at hand.
I'll preserve your objection, but for the reasons stated by the state, I'm going to allow it. The objection's overruled.
she had presented those scholarships, which turned out to be worthless. And then in addition to that, she continued to provide the same excuses to investors that...
I'm going to object to this editorializing, the constant editorializing by this witness.
Your Honor, we can move on.
Something
Yeah,
is
I'll sustain this objection.
There was a federal magistrate that issued a search warrant for the Cochran residence in this case, is that right?
That's correct.
Were you the affiant on that?
I was.
Did you participate in the search of the defendant's home?
I did.
And after the search occurred, did you review the property receipt for that search with the defendant?
I did.
Are there any corrections that you want to make to that property receipt?
Yes, there was one that I noticed in the days following the search warrant while reviewing the documents and things related to the search. I realized that one item had not been properly documented on the property receipt. It had been properly identified and photographed during the execution of the search warrant, and packaged and taken from the scene, but it was not listed by the agent who was completing the inventory at the scene. It was
What procedure did you follow in reviewing the property receipt with the defendant?
At the conclusion of the search warrant, I asked the defendant to join me in the kitchen area at the table so I could go over the property receipts with her. There were 4 of them, and explain to her what exactly they were and that those were her copies. I believe her mother was present for that as well. And got the document out and for the property receipt for the home that we were in. And when I identified that, the defendant immediately began going through the pages. There's multiple pages to that document. And she stopped and identified an item with her finger and said, this right here, this bottle of insulin, I keep this here at my home for a neighbor's child who's diabetic. And I said, okay, thank you for that information. And we concluded the search warrant and left.
Your Honor, I have no further questions for this witness at this time, and I would ask that states 22 through 27 be admitted into evidence.
All right, are there any defense objections to states exhibits 22 through 27?
No, Your Honor.
States 22 through 27 will all be admitted into evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Bledsoe, first of all, I'm going to ask you whether you yourself lost any money or assets by the Ponzi scheme of Mr. and Mrs. Cochran.
No, I did not.
Okay. So you have no personal interest, financial interest in this case whatsoever?
No, I do not.
Okay. Now, I will start with a couple of questions that the prosecution asked you. And if I may I approach the witness?
Yes, you may.
I'm gonna hand the witness what's been marked the state's exhibit number 1. And you recognize that document? That exhibit.
Yes, I do.
Now, in response to the state's question about who appears on that document, you responded that only the defendant, Natalie Cochran, appears on that document, right?
As the defendant in the case, yes.
And that document is actually the judgment in federal criminal trial against Natalie Cochran.
Yes, that's what it says.
And you made some comments about Michael Cochran not being involved in that federal trial, right?
Yes.
In the context of this document.
Correct.
Well, that document was entered in 2021, right?
Yes.
Is it true that Natalie Cochran was indicted on September 25th of 2021? No, I'm sorry, 2019.
That sounds accurate,
That
yes.
sounds right.
Let me interrupt and ask Mr. Selden if we need to call Dr. Banerjee. She's not on the line now. We disconnected her during lunch.
No, Your Honor, I sent her a text message and she's not intending to listen to testimony.
All right, and I apologize, Mr. Victor. Please continue.
So, it shouldn't surprise you, Mr. Bledsoe, that Mr. Cochran's name is nowhere there. He's been dead for half a year. Right?
Yes, that's correct.
So, if you say that his name didn't appear in this context of this federal indictment and judgment against Natalie Cochran, the federal government had absolutely no reason to indict a dead person, right?
That's correct.
And no reason to prosecute a dead person, right?
Yes.
But if you look at the page I don't know, there's, if I may indicate to you, there's a forfeiture proceeding there, isn't there?
I'll have to see it.
Yeah.
To make sure.
Let me show you. Oh, page. Page 14 of the State's Exhibit 1. There is a page dealing with the forfeiture of the assets of the defendant, right?
It appears that way, yes.
But those assets are the same assets that Mr. and Mrs. and Mr. Cochran had together, right?
It appears so, yes.
Ah, okay, if I may retrieve the exhibit.
Yes, sir.
And would it be fair to say, Mr. Bledsoe, that the federal government, from the inception of this case, oh, by the way, let me ask this, try it. I take it from your testimony on the record that you are the officer in charge of the murder investigation, right?
No, I don't think that's accurate.
Who was above you? Who ran this investigation?
It was a joint investigation.
Well, you weren't some kind of underling, were you? You were on top of it.
Yes, Mr. Heinzman and myself, along with the United States Secret Service.
Secret Service. Okay. Well, are we to assume that you know, or you should know, as one of the leading officers of this case, all the aspect of this murder investigation? At least you should.
Yeah, I think that's a accurate statement. I feel like I know the information well.
Okay. All right. So, in fact, the federal government had a lot of interest in this case from the standpoint of the monetary losses that the investors sustained in the Ponzi scheme case, right?
Yes.
And in fact, when this case started, you applied for a search warrant of the defendant's property, right?
No, that's, excuse me, that's not correct.
Did you ever apply for any type of search of any property that belonged to the businesses of Mr. and Mrs. Cochran?
Yes.
What was that application for?
For a federal search warrant.
For a federal search warrant. And in that federal search warrant, isn't it true that, because we're now back to that business of Michael knowing or not knowing what was going on, isn't it true that you listed Mr. Cochran, first of all, as a partner in both corporations, of both businesses?
Yes.
You listed them, okay? And in fact, you stated in the application for that search warrant that they were partners, owners, and, well, in fact, both of them, and operated Technology Management Solution and Tactical Solution Group. Did you say that?
Are you reading that directly from the search warrant?
Not from your application.
Yes, if it's in my application, then yes.
And then Michael Cochran was involved in work involving computers network and information technology for that company, right?
Again, if that's coming from the application, then yes, I would agree with that.
All right. So he knew, according to you, the daily operations of that business, right? Of both businesses, for that matter.
I didn't quite understand your question.
Well, if he participated in the operation of the business and knew everything about the computers and worked on the computers, well, let's strike that. A lot of that business was done online, wasn't it? Of the groups,
Which
the companies.
Which business? There were two businesses.
Well, two businesses. Both of them did a lot of business online, right?
I don't know that I would characterize it as a lot, but they clearly did business electronically, is how I would describe it.
And you testified that Michael was actually working as a computer specialist, right?
Yes.
So, isn't it true that he did a lot of business online for both of these companies?
I don't know the answer to that one.
You don't know how to answer that one. Okay? Then, you know that Michael and Natalie were signatories to their bank statements, right?
Yes.
And both of them had the accounts in First Community Bank, right?
I'm not sure exactly which accounts you're referring to, but
Oh, let's say First Community Bank business account number 4 last digit 4272, opened on July 1st, 2013. Authorized signors being Michael B. Cochran and Natalie Cochran, whose address is blah blah blah. Well, they were both on the account of the business, right?
if you're referring to something from 2013, from memory, I can't recall seeing that.
Is this your application for a search warrant, sir? The last page, it has place for you to sign. This is the document we received from.
Yes, it is.
All right. So look at that page. Look at these accounts. Who are the owners of these accounts?
Do you want a specific account?
Yeah, let's go down the list. Let's see what we can find out.
You want me to read them off?
Well, let's see the first bank.
First Community Bank. Signors being Michael B. Cochran and Natalie B. Cochran.
Okay. And what's the account number on it? Last 4 digits.
0715.
Okay. The second account.
4274.
What bank is that?
First Community Bank.
Okay. Is there any other bank?
Not until the next paragraph, no, sir.
Well, let's go to the next paragraph then. What's that bank?
First Community Bank.
Okay. So that's another account where they're both owners of the account?
Yes.
All right. What's the next one?
City National Bank.
And these are all, by the way, the accounts for the business, right? Or the businesses. These are not some separate personal accounts, are they?
Yes, some of them designate that they are connected to a business, and then some just appear to be personal.
Okay. May I?
Yes, sir.
First Community Bank, there was a personal account. But account number 4274 is Technology Management Solution. That's the account for the business, isn't it?
I don't know exactly what that was for, but it's what it on that document. That business name does appear in that paragraph. Yes.
This is a business account for the TMS, right? Yes or no?
I would assume so. Yes.
Okay. And then we have City National Bank, business account, 9705, Technology Management Solution. opened in February of 2018. Authorized signers being Natalie Cochran and Michael Cochran. That sounds like a business account, right?
Yes, yes, it does.
City National Bank account number 3517, Tactical Solution Group LLC. Open September 27th. Authorized signers being Natalie Cochran and Michael Cochran, whose address is etc. etc. That appears to be a bank account, right?
Correct.
Okay. Branch Banking and Trust, BB&T. Finally, I know what that stands for. BB&T 1402 account number for Tactical Solution Group, opened September 26, 2018. Authorized signers being Natalie Cochran and Michael Cochran.
Correct.
That's a business account.
Yes.
For both of them, right?
Yes.
Another BB&T 1410. Technology Management Solution, DBA TMS. Opened September 26, 2018. Authorized signers being Natalie Cochran and Michael Cochran. That appears to be a business account, right?
Yes.
Then Morgan Chase Bank, 8236 account number for Tactical Solution Group, LLC, DBA, doing business as TSG. Open December 19, 2018. Authorized signers, again, Natalie Cochran and Michael Cochran. That seems to be another banking account. I mean, a business account
Yes.
for both of them.
Correct.
All right. And Michael Cochran actually had access to all of these accounts, right?
Based on that information, I would think so, yes.
Well, you were here all throughout the testimony. You saw the exhibits. Where Michael Cochran signed all these checks, right?
Yes.
For all of the employees and all of the people who rendered services on his behalf, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Then in your petition for search warrant, you stated that during the Cochran's outwardly lavish lifestyle, Cochran's plural, houses, vehicles, philanthropic activities increased and became noticeable by friends, family, and the local community. You state the Cochrans were active in the community sports, acting as coaches, teams, volunteers, board members, and the Cochrans would supply uniforms, equipment, supplies for the Little League teams, etc., etc. Both of them, right?
And that's coming directly from the application.
There you go.
Then yes, that's correct.
Well, so they had a lavish lifestyle. We'll come back to that. January 2018, the Cochrans purchased a commercial building together, right? For $66,000.
Yes.
Where did that money come from?
That money came from investments.
Investments. Right? And then they purchased another, they purchased three buildings total, right? For which the money came from, two buildings, for which the money came from the investments, right?
I don't recall exactly how many, sir.
Okay. And then investors gave him between December 7, 2017 and March 2018, $230,000. Is that true?
Yes.
And you claim through your testimony that they used the money for the lifestyle. Both of them.
That's what the money at that time was being used for.
That's right. Now, you also state that the Cochrans claimed to have sold such high volume of firearms to the government that their firearm supplies and manufacturers rewarded them with the discounts up to 75% for Glock, Kimber, Ruger, Smith & Wesson. And the Cochrans never sold a gun to anybody or a firearm, right?
No, I don't believe that's correct.
Well, they sold some, but
Yes.
certainly not the volume that they claimed, right?
No, we knew that they didn't sell that volume.
Okay. And would you agree with me, sir, that Natalie Cochran knew absolutely nothing about firearms or weapons in your thorough investigation of this case?
Objection, Your Honor, that calls for speculation. You can't speak to what the defendant did or did not know.
Oh, this is the whole case is about what the defendant knew.
I'll allow it. I'll overrule the objection. Go ahead.
Could you repeat that, sir?
Well, Natalie Cochran did not ever talk to you, or you have no evidence that she knew anything about armor, weapons, guns, firearms, military outfits. She didn't know anything about it.
That's not correct.
No, she knew intimately what the firearms were like, what she was dealing with, what she was selling. She knew that. Is that your testimony here today?
I wouldn't characterize it as how intimately or whatever the words you used, but no, that's not accurate. She did have some knowledge of firearms and trying to negotiate firearms sales with the local police department.
Okay. But Michael was the man. He knew about the firearms. He knew about the tactical gear, right?
I don't know that. I never
No?
spoke to him about that.
Well, he was enamored with firearms, with weapons. True?
I don't know, sir.
You don't know that. Well, in the thorough investigation of this case, did you ever learn that Michael was indeed involved in the firearm business?
The information that I saw was that the defendant was trying to negotiate a sale of firearms with the Raleigh County Sheriff's Department, and there was information also that she was trying to negotiate a deal for a firearms sale with the West Virginia State Police, which was completely fictitious.
And Michael knew nothing about it. He who handles firearms, who made his, well, did you know that he was proud and advised everybody to watch the movie called Warlords about the firearms deals. That was one of his favorite movies. Did you know that?
Yes, I believe the name of the movie is actually War Dogs.
War Dogs.
That was
Oh,
brought
I'm sorry.
to
I'm
that was
not
brought
up
to
on
my
my-
attention during the
Not
investigation.
up on my cinematographic gems, but that was something that Michael really loved because he was enamored with firearms, and that's what he tried to establish his business in, right?
I can't answer that.
Cannot answer that. Now, licenses, were they applied to both of the defendants? Licenses for the business licenses, were they in the name of Michael Cochran? Well, you investigated this case.
I'm trying to figure out which business you're referring
Well, any
to.
business licenses, were they ever signed or issued to Mr. Cochran?
I can't recall that from memory. If you have something you're referring to that I could view,
I'm just asking you whether you recall.
no, I can't recall that from memory.
Now, is it true that at some point Mr. Cochran commingled or participated in commingling the personal accounts and the business accounts?
I can't say that he did or he didn't.
Well, in paragraph 71 for your application for the warrant, the Cochrans commingled their day-to-day and personal expenditures in all of their business accounts.
Then
He
yes.
said that.
Okay, yes.
So they commingle the accounts, so they wouldn't even know what is theirs, what is the business's. What is the investor's money, what is theirs, right?
I don't know if that's a fair assessment of that information.
Well, but if they commingle their funds, well then one day when Mr. Cochran wants to pay for his, shall we say, lunch, and wants to pay by check, which is kind of outmoded today, but wants to pay by check, he doesn't know whether he's paying actually with the money from the investors or whether he's paying with his own money. Or does he know?
No, I wouldn't know how he would know which money it is.
Well, let's say that's the money that he received, let's say, from his parents for $44,000. And he puts it in his personal account or the commingled account. Wouldn't he know that that money is from the investors, i.e. his parents, and he cannot touch it because it should be in a separate account?
No, that money was given to the company for investments into government contracts through the Tactical Solutions Group business or the Technology Management Solutions business.
So how many times did Mr. Cochran actually receive the money from the investors himself? Here comes Johnny investor and says, Michael, here's a check I'm gonna give you for the investment. How many times did something like that happen?
Again, I can't recall that from memory, sir.
Well, you don't know. All right, you can't recall. And would it, I'm looking at that form that you signed to, and the expenditure of that TMS or whatever the two businesses is over $1,100,000 plus, $1,123,517.07 for all kinds of things. For the Toyota, that was their car. For getting some cash, Polaris, horse trailer, earrings, easy loader, heating and cooling. These are the expenses that the TMS incurred over the years, and those were the expenses that you yourself claim came out of the illegal proceeds, right?
It came out of the business accounts.
Business accounts that they both controlled, right?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, when the federal government finally looked at the harvest of your hard work, the federal government claimed that both of the defendants enjoyed the proceeds of the account, right? Or accounts. True?
Yes.
Yes. And then just happened that while the federal government was ready to indict them both, in September of 2019, Mr. Cochran unexpectedly died, right?
That's not correct.
No? All right, you've been involved in federal investigation of the cases, sir, haven't you?
Of other cases?
Yeah.
Yes.
You're telling this jury that if there is ever a couple, husband and wife, who are cheating on taxes, let's say, or who are involved in some, money laundering or some other financial scheme, you are telling us that from your experience, that the federal government would only investigate one and not the other? Is that your understanding of the federal investigation, sir?
It would depend upon the evidence that was set forth in each investigation. I've seen it go both directions.
You have seen the cases where the couples, married couples, are investigated individually? You really have?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
I've conducted those myself.
And in fact, the federal government, you have no evidence to suggest, sir, that the federal government would not have indicted Mr. Cochran had he not been dead by September 25th of 2019.
No, I don't believe that he would have.
He would not have been indicted. Even though the federal government was looking at all of his property that he enjoyed and had at his disposal and purchased with the proceeds of illegal transactions. You do not believe that he would have been charged with these offenses?
No, but I don't believe that there was evidence to support that.
No, just to the contrary. Would you agree with me that, as we have already heard in this court, this couple lived a lifestyle of the rich and famous? They had purchases amounting to literally a couple of $1 million, right?
I would say that's fairly accurate, yes.
And that couple had purchases that were not some piddly little items. You know, when Mr. Cochran was buying Natalie a ring, he didn't buy a $500 ring. He bought a $14,000 ring, right?
I actually don't know who purchased the ring or a ring.
When he bought the real property, it wasn't some ramshackle affair somewhere in some hall or somewhere. It was a big time property.
Actually, he wasn't able to complete transactions on property that he was trying to purchase because he couldn't complete the sale because the money was not available to do that, and he believed that it was.
I see. But he managed somehow to get himself a couple of motorcycles, well, several motorcycles, a couple of cars, including the antiques. He was somehow able to remodel his, $300,000 house, right? He was able to do all of this financially from his income that we still cannot determine.
He believed his income was coming from the proceeds of the legitimate business that he believed he operated, doing government contracts and receiving payment back from the government based on those contracts, which was not true.
And of course, you're in his head and you know what he was thinking. That's your testimony?
No, sir, I'm not saying that.
Now, the federal government didn't take kindly to any of this, and the federal government asked for the forfeiture of all of that property, didn't it?
Yes.
And for that matter, the federal government asked for the forfeiture of assets. Well, let's start with the let's start with $523,343. And no, I'm sorry, it's the assets 523,343,361. What is it? $523 million?
That doesn't sound accurate. I'm
Well-
not sure what you're referring to.
Well, I show you the forfeiture
Yes.
that the federal government filed against the Cochran. May I approach?
Yes, you may.
I always suck in math. But would you please read this? The Cochrans listed their assets as
Yes, I'm sorry. Listed as $522,091,571, and that was not true.
I didn't ask you whether it was true. It's in the federal forfeiture proceedings.
Yes.
And it was signed by the assistant U.S. attorney. You think she made it up?
No.
somehow?
No.
Well, so they listed assets to the tune of $500 billion with a B, like boy, $1 billion.
Yes.
Let's say, Mr. Bledsoe, that I'm coming home and my wife tells me, well, our assets are $500 million today. Shouldn't I be surprised?
Yes, I would be surprised and
So
question it.
Mr. Cochran looks at these assets that are listed. We have $500 million in assets. What the heck are we doing in West Virginia? We should be somewhere, I don't know, in Monte Carlo, some other place. $500 million, sir. And he didn't know about all these assets?
I don't know if he listed that or not. This document was filed in July of 2019 after Mr. Cochran's death.
Well, these assets, these $500 million, didn't. You know the saying, Rome wasn't built in one day. That $523 million did not grow in the bank or wherever it was in one day, right?
No, that information came from documentation that the defendant had tried to use as part of the federal indictment in which he was charged.
Well, as we agreed before, my gal was a pretty bad girl, right? My client here. She was a fraud, right?
I'm not here to judge anyone, sir.
Okay. Now, I just want to ask you a couple of questions in regard to your testimony here today. You said that you were surprised. You found it odd when my client told you that her husband used to inject himself with insulin, right?
Yes,
Especially that it was in the back, right?
that's correct.
And you found the word back somewhat objectionable, right? You found it odd.
Yes, it didn't seem like something that I expected to hear.
Or maybe she was just trying to be polite. Maybe she didn't want to use the word hip or leg, or maybe a good old word butt. Or maybe, for that matter, the word that starts with an A and has 3 letters in it. Maybe she was just trying to be polite. And she said, well, it was in the back.
That's what she said, yes.
Yeah, that did not really seem odd to you, did it? It didn't seem odd that it seemed odd that he would inject himself with insulin?
It seemed odd to me, yes, because he was not a diabetic that I was aware of, and I had never heard of anyone injecting themselves with insulin for workout or bodybuilding purposes. No, sir, I'd never heard.
Never. Okay. All right. Fair enough. You testified on direct here that you found it suspicious that my client and Michael, did not go to the meeting with that fine banker that just testified here a couple of days ago. You found it odd.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, they were supposed to go and meet the banker, right?
That's my understanding, yes.
But they didn't because Natalie was sick.
That's correct.
That's correct. And Well, would it surprise you if you knew that the account wasn't even open? There was nothing to discuss about the account.
That wouldn't surprise me one bit.
And for that matter, do you have any idea that Natalie went to the doctor? Not on the day when Mr. Cochran collapsed in his home, but the day before. Did you know that?
Yes, he went on the 5th and the 6th.
So she went there on the 5th and on the 6th. And she complained about all kinds of problems, bad enough for the doctor to give her a shot and give her medication. Right?
I think that's accurate, yes.
Okay. So all of these shenanigans which you accuse her of, including not being able to go to meet the banker in Virginia and all of that, can be simply explained by the fact that she was ill or sick, and the doctor who gave her the medication pretty much told her to stay in bed. And she was really genuinely ill or genuinely sick. Wouldn't that be a fair explanation, sir?
I don't know what the physician may have told her. I know that Mr. Cochran was trying to continue that trip without her, along with Mr. Davis if necessary.
And for that matter, did you know that Mr. Cochran himself didn't want to go without Natalie?
I believe he indicated that he would prefer that she go.
He indicated that he wanted to go with Natalie, and that's why he didn't go. Not because he had some suspicion that she was going to execute him that day. Right?
No, he wanted to go to the Bank of America to try to find out why he was not receiving the funds that he thought he had been told that $1.4 billion was going to be deposited into that account after February the 1st.
Could it be that maybe because he bought himself a 1964 Cobra, there was no money in that account?
The Cobra, I believe, was purchased before there was any dealing with Bank of America.
Maybe because he bought himself a couple of nice motorcycles. That's why there was no money in that account.
I don't know why there's no money in that account. Well, actually, I do know why there was no money in that account, because the basis for any funding coming to that account, as you heard from Mr. Nexon as well, was that it was supposed to be coming from payments for government contracts and returns on investments. The contracts were never
Bledsoe.
done, and there was no money ever coming.
Mr. Bledsoe, did you listen to that banker? There was no account, was there? There was no account, was there?
I don't
They
know if
haven't
the I don't know if
established
the
any
count was that was the process. He explained, the way I understood his explanation is they were in the process of trying to open an account, and he had vetted the information that he was provided
Mr.
by the
Bledsoe,
defendant.
as we stand here today, as I stand here today, as you sit there, as you remember the testimony of that banker, there was no account. You can be in the process of doing something, but that doesn't make it necessarily so, sir. They had no account. True?
No, I don't think that's true.
Okay. You're telling us that they had the bank in Virginia already established, and they were ready to pounce on the banker in Virginia to figure out why there was no money there. Is that what it was? Is that your testimony?
That Michael Cochran was wanting to travel to that bank and meet with Mr. Nixon to try to find out why there was no money in that account.
As the lead investigator in this case, show the jury any document that would establish that the account in the Virginia, Lynchburg, Virginia bank was already in existence. Can you do that?
I can,
Yes or no?
as I'm sitting here right now, I can't.
No, you cannot do it because they needed what is known as wet signatures, right? The signatures in writing.
Yes, I remember that.
Many banks require that a person appear in person to open an account.
Yes, Michael Cochran had told the defendant that since she was sick, he would travel on and get that signature information and bring it back so she could sign hers as well. He was determined to get this done.
He was determined and yet he didn't go. Right? Okay. Now, that little bottle of the substance that you testified to was not insulin, that you received from Mr. and Mrs. Bolt. What was it?
I can't pronounce the name that the chemist from the FBI lab called it, identified it as.
Anaclophamine, if I pronounce it,
That-
probably mispronounced it with my inflection anyway. So, anaclophamine,
That was how it was labeled, but you asked me about the substance in the bottle, I believe, and
Okay.
that was identified to be
Well, that
something
was-
different than the label.
well, that was the substance to fight the waning testosterone, right?
I don't know what that's for.
Well, you investigated this case. You're claiming that my client killed her husband with a substance, and you would not be curious to know the effects of the medication that you just found?
Yes, that's exactly why we submitted it for testing.
Okay, well, so now you know that this substance is designed to, help the macho man, be a macho man, the testosterone medication, right?
I can't say that I know that personally. I can say that what I heard testified to here by the chemist, that would be the basis of my knowledge of that
And
substance.
certainly, that could not be the medication that killed this guy, because that medication makes a person combative, right?
Your Honor, he's asking him to testify as to medical knowledge that he has clearly stated he does not have.
You don't know what that medication is.
Sustained.
Right, fine.
I do have limited
Hold on,
knowledge.
no questions pending. You testified on direct that you believe that Natalie's statement concerning her cancer is false.
In the context of the time that it was being reported by her, I believe my testimony was that I hadn't obtained any evidence to support that.
Well, did you get any evidence from Duke University?
I believe we subpoenaed, off the top of my head, I can't remember without reviewing it, but I believe we did subpoena some documents from Duke.
And did she have anything that resembled cancer?
I don't recall
I
that.
don't recall. Now, did you know that she first went to the Cleveland Clinic?
I remember references to the Cleveland Clinic in the text messages, but I don't know if she ever actually went there. I don't think we subpoenaed any documentation from Cleveland Clinic.
And do you know whether she was accepted or rejected there?
No, I do not know that.
And if she was rejected for such insidious purpose as lack of insurance, that still would not change the fact that she may have had cancer. Right?
I can't answer that.
And if she then went to Duke, you don't know whether she had cancer or not. You're just speculating here.
No, I'm basing my answer off of documents I
By the way,
reviewed
how did you get into her medical records, sir?
with a subpoena.
With a subpoena? So which doctors did you subpoena for her medical records?
There were quite a few. I would have to see a list of those to actually recite them back, but there were several.
And you're testifying here today that she was, at least from your surreptitious review of her medical records, that she is a model of health.
No, sir, I'm not saying that.
Well, what's wrong with her? What was wrong with her at that time?
The one thing that I do recall that I remember from that is that she was having treatment for some type of heart issue and a heart ablation.
Did you obtain the records from Mount General Oncology?
Again, possible, but I don't just can't remember that without having a list of them.
I think we all know what oncology means, right?
Did you say oncology?
Oncology, yeah.
Yes, I'm very familiar with that word.
Yeah. That's one of the worst words that you ever want to hear in your life, right?
Yes, it is.
That's a place that deals with cancer, with an illness for which there is no universal care, sir. Right? And if that woman went to Mount Oncology, she wasn't there to ask for candy. She went there to ask for medical advice concerning a condition which may end up her life. True?
I don't know. I can't speak to those
And you
records or a visit if I can't
And you
see
don't
it.
know. Yet, stubbornly, you refuse to acknowledge that this woman may have had a condition of which you have no clue, no idea. Right?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that based on the information that I had and was provided, I didn't see anything that indicated that.
Do you ever submit it to any doctors for any review of Ms. Cochran's medical conditions? Or you just evaluated it yourself?
I don't believe I think the only records that we submitted to any doctors were for Mr. Cochran.
All right. I want to ask you a little bit about, you said several times that based on my investigation, remember saying that several times?
I do.
You do. Well, who lived in Cochran's household in the year of, let's say, 2018?
I can't say for certain who actually lived in the household. I was never in their household
All right,
in
let me make
2008.
it simple. Do they have any children?
Yes,
Did you interview any of these children?
I did.
However many children they had?
I did not.
You did not. Wouldn't that be an invaluable source of information concerning their lifestyles, drug consumption at home, health of their parents? Would have been, and these children are now, one of them is still 17, but one is 20. So a couple of years ago, they were still 15, 13, 14. You could have asked them all kinds of questions, but you didn't interview them, did you?
No, we did not.
Huh? Did you know, and I'm going to refer to these texts. Oh, by the way, let me ask you this. Do you have any idea whether Michael Cochran was a dominant figure in the marriage? Or was it Natalie Cochran who was dominant in that marriage?
I can offer no observation on that either way.
If I told you that in August of 2018, the phone that Natalie Cochran had was actually taken from her by her husband, would you believe that?
don't know whether to believe it or not. I don't know the source of that information.
Would I, if I told you that Mr. Cochran controlled Miss Cochran's use of a computer, would you have any evidence to contradict that?
That he controlled her use?
Controlled the use of the computers at home.
No.
Would you have any evidence to contradict that Mr. Cochran actually had the phone that belonged to Mrs. Cochran for about 2 months before he even let her use it again?
I have no information about that.
And would you have any information to contradict the proposition that these messages that you played were actually sent by Mr. Cochran rather than Mrs. Cochran?
No, I don't believe that.
You don't believe that? All right. In your thorough investigation of this case, and since you have such knack for getting medical records, did you obtain the medical records of Mr. Cochran's?
Yes, we did obtain several medical records for Mr. Cochran.
What happened to him in 2017?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Well, did he have a back surgery in 2017? Do you recall that from looking at this?
Actually, I believe I recall that from hearing it here during this proceeding.
Well, you have any reason to doubt that?
Doubt that he had a back surgery?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. And I think we've established it already that on October 31st, Mr. Cochran went to the hospital with some mysterious conditions that couldn't be accounted for.
Yes.
And those conditions may have involved convulsions, maybe epilepsy, right? Whatever it was serious.
I recall that there were numerous suspicious, or I guess symptoms would be a better word, that were part of that. But my recollection of that is that there was no clear diagnosis.
That was my question. Did you hear about October 31st? He went to the hospital.
Correct.
Yes or no?
Yes.
And his conditions, and by the way, you knew from your thorough investigation of this case that Michael Cochran hated hospitals with an unbridled passion.
I wouldn't characterize
Okay.
that.
He hated hospitals, all right.
I can't say that I know that.
Did he want to stay in a hospital from all your investigation?
No.
No. But soon enough, on November 2nd, he was again in the hospital, only this time for 5 days, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And for 5 days, which hospital was it, by the way?
I don't know. I can't remember if it was Memorial or General, but it was Charleston Area Medical Center.
Not a bad hospital, is it?
It's a fine, very fine hospital.
And these fine doctors there could not really determine what it was. They claimed there was a mold exposure and all of that, but he had the conditions that didn't have anything to do with mold, right?
Yes.
And those conditions, and we've been through it already on one examination of one officer. Convulsive epilepticus, so he may have had epilepsy, right?
I think there was a whole list of things that might have
Yes, encephalopathy, which is what?
been. I don't know.
Okay. Respiratory failure, seizure, altered mental state, enlarged heart. Now, those are serious conditions, right?
Yes.
And he was vomiting, he had fever, rash, dizziness, urinary retention. He couldn't go to the bathroom. A sepsis could have set in. That's serious, isn't it?
Yes.
Chronic sinusitis, he couldn't breathe on top of that. Serious stuff. So he stayed in the hospital, and then when he came out of the hospital, isn't it true that he told everybody he was not going back? True or not?
I don't know. I have been told that, yes.
Yeah. And you knew that he was using supplements, right?
I don't know that. I was told that by the defendant.
Okay. Well, you did. You looked at his computers and all that, right? Or their computers, his computers, when you did the search.
Yes, we did seize computers and cell phones.
Well, Mr. Cochran started in 2017, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, corresponding with the Advocare International. What was that company?
I'm not familiar with that company.
Well, maybe not too many people are familiar with it, detective, because that was one of the companies that may have provided him with the substances that the American government wouldn't want to know about. Did you check it out?
No, I did not.
Okay. How about, well, we know Amazon.com, KYDC LLC. He started that in 2015. What did he purchase from them?
What year was that?
2015. I think he started in 2015.
We wouldn't have looked, that was been outside of scope, I think, of anything we were looking at.
Well, but yes, you're charging this woman with murder by poison, and you don't want to know what kind of substances this man had after you found two suspicious substances in their home?
Well, I knew that one suspicious substance, the enclomiphene citrate, the bottle labeled enclomiphene citrate, the defendant, the first time I interviewed her, told me that Michael Cochran overdosed on that morning on the 6th, and that's what led to his condition and ultimate death.
Well, obviously, you have, well, we'll come to that in a second. You have no evidence, sir, that she injected him with anything. You don't have any of that evidence, do you? You don't have any punctures, you don't have any syringes, you don't have any of it, do you?
Haven't seen any punctures in
On his body?
No.
You don't have any syringes?
No.
No. And you also know, in your thorough investigation of this case, that Humalog, and you heard this testimony as you were sitting here today, acts in a delayed fashion. 15 to 30 minutes after somebody's injected, that insulin takes effect. Yes or no? You heard that. Yes or no?
I'm trying to remember what was testified to, and I don't want to sit here and try to repeat testimony, but I want to answer your question. That sounds consistent with what was testified to here earlier.
And so I kind of want to know, detective, if the events of February the 6th somehow comport with what you believe them to be. On the 6th of February, I submit to you that my client is alone in a house with Michael Cochran, right? In the morning.
At some time that morning, yes, they both returned to the home and were there together alone.
Kids go to school, she goes to a doctor, he goes to a coffee place, Starbucks, and they're happily at home. Now, I submit to you that she comes from, say, he's in the kitchen, and she stabs him or jabs him with a syringe full of insulin. He doesn't drop to the floor immediately, does he?
I would have no way of answering that.
Well, you heard the testimony here of the experts. That insulin has a delayed reaction, 15 to 30 minutes, right?
Yes, I believe that's what the doctor
So
said.
this woman jabs him, this athlete, and this little girl stabs him with that insulin, and his reaction is, "Thank you, honey. May I have another one?" Now, come on, detective. She would stab him, and his first reaction was, "What the heck was that?"
Actually, she told me that he had been sleeping for 45 minutes to an hour prior to his medical event that morning.
But we've established that it could not have happened in the bed upstairs, could it?
She said he was sleeping on the couch.
So she injected him, and he didn't wake up, right? Is that your testimony?
No, that's not my testimony.
Okay, so she jabs him in the kitchen, and he has 15 minutes to half an hour to react to it, and he does nothing? Is that your testimony here today? He does nothing but drops on the floor after waiting for half an hour?
No, that's not my testimony.
Well, wouldn't it a normal person who got jabbed by, and by the way, that could not have happened in silence. It would be one of those, "You son of a gun, you know, I'm gonna stab you, I'm gonna kill you, you've done this to me," or whatever. But that usually doesn't happen in silence, that type of action. If I stab you, I wouldn't be doing it in silence, would I? So this woman stabs him, true? And then he has 15 minutes to 30 minutes to react.
But Judge, this is entirely speculation, and he's placing testimony in the witnesses now.
Well, I think we've gone too far
Okay.
along this line. Let's please move on, Mr. Victor.
Mr. Bledsoe, she wasn't there in the apartment in her house with just Michael. Soon enough, there were about 9 people milling around that house, right? 2 workers, right?
Yes, Mr. Bowen and Mr. Miller were the first to arrive
Okay.
sometime between, I think, around close to 12:30.
Who else?
John Hamilton arrived shortly after they did.
The sister also.
I'm not sure exactly what time she got there.
But she did get
It was
there.
later in the day.
With her boyfriend.
Yes.
And then there was Mr. Davis.
Finally, yes.
So let me propose this scenario for you. The defendant who is planning to kill her husband goes to Miss Davis and asks for a murder weapon, right? The insulin.
There was a text between them where the defendant procured a bottle of insulin from Miss Davis, yes.
So if she, for example, wanted to kill him with a gun, she would have obtained a gun from a third person, right? All right.
Assistant.
Okay? Would you agree with me, Mr. Bledsoe, that she just brought 2 people into the potential case against her by asking for the insulin and having the insulin delivered by another person to her home? So now she has 2 witnesses against her, right?
The witnesses could be for or against her.
Okay. And would you also agree with me that all of these people who came later to the house could also be the witnesses against her? Right?
As I stated, for or against.
You heard the testimony that this type of medication cannot kill. That this type of medication, the Humalog, is not a deadly substance.
Objection, Your Honor, that was not anyone's testimony.
Assistant.
Right? You don't have any evidence to suggest, Officer Bledsoe, that my client injected Mr. Cochran later in the day when all of these people were present. Do you?
I think the evidence that was testified to by Dr. Krieger and Dr. Uribe support the theory that that was possible. Yes.
Possible? Then I will ask you here today and under oath, sir. Point me in the direction of my client injecting anybody with insulin while all these 7 or 8 or 9 people were present. What time, under what circumstances, where, and with what syringe and what insulin? Point it to the jury. Tell the jury.
Yes. I can't answer that.
Because you don't know. You don't have any of that evidence, do you?
Just refer to my previous answer about the evidence.
Right. At the time of, you remember that this case had been dismissed once, pending the second, the autopsy, right?
Which autopsy are you referring to, sir?
Well, the second autopsy upon the second exhumation of Mr. Cochran.
I wasn't a part of the second exhumation in any way.
Okay? At the time this case was indicted in 2023, all your evidence suggested that there was no insulin involved in this case. True?
No,
No?
that's not true.
Well, medical evidence by Dr. Kubitschek. What did it tell you?
You'd have to be more specific which medical
Well, you heard
evidence.
him testify. There was no evidence of the intentional homicide, right?
I believe his report reflected it was undetermined.
Right. Prior to Dr. Krieger and her involvement in this case, point me to the evidence, medical evidence, that insulin was involved in this case. You don't have any.
I think the blood glucose level of Michael Cochran would be considered medical evidence that
When and by whom?
at Raleigh General Hospital on the February the 6th date when he was taken there.
Show me the evidence that would indicate that, or show the jury the evidence, that the Raleigh General Hospital believed Michael's death as a homicide or suspicious for homicide.
That was not.
I agree. The court has to sustain the objection.
Okay. Then you have Dr. Krieger, whom the prosecutor hired, and Dr. Uribe, and these two came up with the concept of insulin injection being the murder weapon, right?
I don't believe I heard either one of them testify that to a murder weapon.
Well then, from your thorough investigation of this case, Mr. Bledsoe, how was this poison administered?
I can't answer that.
Can't answer that. Now, I want to ask you something else. You testified in this case that, and you testified before the grand jury, right? In this case.
Yes, sir.
And the gist of your testimony before the grand jury was that Michael was about to find out the whole scope of my client's financial improprieties, right?
Are you referring directly to my grand jury testimony?
Well, I mean, all right, forget your grand jury. You believe that Michael was about to find out about my client being a dishonest fraud who deceived even him, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And somehow she killed him because he was going to do what? He was going to run to the feds. He was going to expose her. He was going to kill her himself. What the heck was he gonna do when he learned all of this?
I have no way of knowing. I never got the opportunity to ask him.
Well, but Mr. Bledsoe, we're looking at a person who has been married to his high school sweetheart for 17 years, who has 2 children with her, and all of a sudden he finds out that this sweetheart is cheating. She's a fraud, right? Well, first reaction, wouldn't the first reaction be, well, let's talk about it, honey. What happened? Let's think about it. Let's call a lawyer, right?
Your Honor, we're speculating again.
Well,
We're going down the road that we probably shouldn't, so I'm going to sustain the objection.
she had no reason to kill him because we have no idea what this man would have done, even if she told him, honey, I'm a cheat, she had no reason to kill him.
No, I wouldn't agree with that.
No, she had the reason to kill him because he was gonna do what? He was gonna kill her? What the heck? Officer, come on.
No, I never said that he was going to kill her.
Well, what was he gonna do? So that she had to take such a drastic measure as to kill him.
Objection, Your Honor. This has already been asked and answered. He said already that he did not know what Michael was going to do because he never got a chance to ask him.
I'll allow that question to stand. Answer if you can, officer.
Could you repeat that, please?
What would he do if he learned that she was a cheat?
I don't know what he would have done.
Okay. Now, you talked to several witnesses in this case, including Mr. Treadway, right?
Mr. Treadway?
Yes.
That's not correct.
You didn't?
I sure wanted to and attempted to, but he refused to meet and speak with me.
Okay. How about Mr. Bowen?
Could you be more Jason Bowen? Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did Mr. Oh, let me see. Where's Mr. Bowen's list? Did Mr. Bowen tell you that in February of 2019, shortly before Michael's death, Michael appeared foggy, out of it, loopy? You remember that?
Is that being taken directly from an interview that I did with you?
Yeah, it is. We
Yes,
can play
that-
it. And you
yes.
remember now?
Yes, that sounds accurate.
Okay. That Michael was sweating. Michael was off balance. Michael wasn't himself. Remember that?
I don't remember it verbatim, no, but that sounds consistent, yes.
Okay. You remember a situation when Mr. Davis testified that Michael, in I think it was in January of 2019, Michael was doing some kind of a job repairing somebody's light fixtures, right?
I believe he was assisting Mr. Davis with the installation of a ceiling fan, as I recall.
And appeared to be completely out of it.
No, that's not accurate.
Now he was confused.
I don't remember exactly how Mr. Davis described that. I know he wasn't overly concerned about it because he laughed and told me, he said, but man, he said, we got the ceiling fan installed. So it didn't rise to a level of great concern for Mr. Davis, but he felt it was necessary for us to know that.
Do you remember talking to Michael Davis about this case?
To who? I'm sorry.
To Michael, I'm sorry, to Chris Davis.
Chris Davis, yes.
Do you remember having Mr. Davis advising you that Michael Cochran in February of 2019 appeared to mentally struggle while assisting him with the installation of a ceiling fan?
Yes, that's what I just described.
That's in your report.
Yes.
He also described Mr. Cochran as having outbursts of stress and anger. And he never observed that before in Michael. Do you remember that?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. You knew that Michael was using all kinds of supplements, right?
I didn't know that. I was told that by the defendant, yes.
Well, Mr. Bowen, for that matter, told you that Michael took as many as 35 supplements a day. We can play that statement.
If you're saying that came from his statement, then yes, I'll agree with that.
Mr. Bowen also said that Michael used a dropper to administer enclophamine. Remember that? He would take a couple of drops at a time.
Did he name that specific substance?
Substance being discussed, and the substance being discussed, from what I understand, was enclophamine.
I don't recall that directly, but
Okay.
if
Now, do you remember a witness, and I think it was maybe Mr. Bowen, who told you that Michael got confused in a grocery store, didn't know where he was, couldn't recognize his car in the parking lot.
I believe that, I'm not sure where the location was. I believe the way he characterized that is Mr. Cochran couldn't remember where he'd parked his vehicle.
I see. Did you know that Michael Cochran apparently hated Panera Bread, the restaurant?
No, I did not.
Ah, of course. And a witness testified, the testimony would be that he actually went there and didn't know where he was. Would that surprise you?
Who said that?
That would be Mr. Treadway.
Again, I would have been glad to talk to Mr. Treadway, but he refused.
Okay. Wouldn't it be fair to say, Mr. Bledsoe, that Michael wasn't himself the last couple of months between the time he was in a hospital and the time when he actually collapsed in a home?
Yes, I believe that's fair to say. He was definitely exhibiting signs, I think, of stress over not being able to find out where his money was that was supposed to be in the bank.
Sure, I understand that. But he also exhibited some serious illnesses, and he was prescribed some serious medication. And I'd like to ask you whether you know whether he was ever diagnosed with seizures and acute encephalopathy.
I don't recall if he was specifically diagnosed with that or not.
Well, did you read the report of Dr. Ward? I mean, it's in the story. Just give it to us. You gave it to us.
I'm sure that, yes, that I reviewed those documents. It's been many years ago, and sitting here right now to recall it off the top of my head.
So if he had an acute condition of seizures, encephalopathy, and was prescribed medication that I probably cannot even pronounce, lamotrigine, serious medication against seizures, anticonvulsant, would that surprise you? He had that condition?
Without actually seeing the documents and being able to know exactly how it's phrased and see the exact verbiage, I can't really say if it would surprise me or not. I know he sought treatment and was treated for various symptoms and possibilities of different medical conditions, but I don't ever remember seeing a clear diagnosis that definitively said this is exactly what's wrong with Michael Cochran.
He was treated to the extent that he refused to take the medication. Did you know that?
I have been told that.
You've been told that. He refused to take what medication, sir?
It was referred to as seizure medication.
That's not good, is it?
I don't know.
Okay. Maybe we're closer to the end, Your Honor.
Okay.
Did you know that Mr. Cochran was using the so-called smart drugs from nootropics?
I'm not familiar with that term, smart drugs. I don't know
Well, you
what that
gave
is.
us the discovery. You did all these investigation. You didn't know that Mr. Cochran was using substances that you didn't even know about?
If it was a discovery, that doesn't necessarily mean that I had knowledge that he was actually using anything.
Did you hear anything about Mr. Cochran using substances that boosted the brain performance?
No, I don't recall hearing that.
Anything about substances that increase the memory of a person who uses them?
No, like I said, only, I guess, the supplement information that I was given was by the defendant after Mr. Cochran was deceased.
Did you know that he used any stimulants to keep him awake?
No.
Did you know that he was using substances that had pretty serious side effects, such as high blood pressure, fast heart rate, insomnia, trouble sleeping? Did you know that he was using these substances?
I don't know what substance you're referring to.
For example, Provigil.
Could you pronounce that again?
Provigil. Provigil.
I don't know if he was using that or not.
How about substances like Adderall, Ritalin?
Do I know if he was using them? No, I don't know that.
You participated in the search of the Cochran residence in June of 2019, right?
That's correct.
And you were there to seek financial information, right?
So it's a wide variety of things we were there seeking as part of that search warrant.
Well, the search warrant provided mostly for the evidence of financial crimes. You weren't searching anything related to murder, were you?
No.
No. May I?
Yes.
Showing you what's been marked as the defense exhibit number 9. It may be 9, 10, or 11, or it's 9.
It says 9 and 4 photos.
Okay, so it's collective 9.
Yes, sir.
Would you tell us what that is?
It's a vial with the label Humalog on it.
Is it true, sir, that you found that vial in the refrigerator of Mrs. Cochran?
That's correct.
Okay. And that was the vial that has already been discussed here before this jury in this case, right?
That's correct.
Mr. Cochran died in February of 2019, right?
Yes.
And you find this vial in June. That would be June, well, I don't remember the exact date. June what?
I believe the search warrant was on June 25th of 2019.
Okay. Well, some 4 months later.
Yes.
Looking at this exhibit, would you agree with me that this bottle is full?
No.
No? Look at the second picture. Would you agree with me that that bottle is, that's the same bottle, isn't it?
It appears to be, yes.
And that bottle is full.
I can't tell anything at all from this picture
You can't, okay?
as far as the level of contents.
Okay. And would you flip to the next page? And that bottle appears to be full. Am I correct or am I wrong?
The same answer. I can't tell from this picture. I can't make an assessment.
Remember the testimony of the expert who said that you would have to inject somebody with a fair amount, and she did that, if I remember the gesture, something like that. Remember that? Correct or am I wrong?
The same answer. I can't tell from this picture. I can't make an assessment.
Remember the testimony of the expert who said that you would have to inject somebody with a fair amount, and she did that, if I remember the gesture, something like that. Remember that? To cause the death with that type of insulin.
Which expert are you referring to?
Dr. Krieger, she said she used the word fair amount.
That sounds accurate.
So does it appear to you, and we don't know exactly where this gesture stopped, but would it appear to you that a fair amount of substance from this bottle has been withdrawn?
I can't testify to what Dr. Krieger believes is a fair amount based on a hand signal.
Would you agree with me, sir, that as you sit here today, you cannot tell this jury with any degree of certainty that this bottle that was found in the refrigerator of my clients is the bottle that was used by in your case, what you believe, as the murder weapon?
Can you ask me that again, please?
This is not the bottle that was used and its substance been used to allegedly inject Mr. Cochran. You have no evidence of that.
I can't say if it is or it isn't.
Do you have any evidence whatsoever that it is? Let me ask you this before you maybe ask you another question. You have any fingerprints on that bottle?
Not that I'm aware of.
You have any DNA on this bottle? We're talking about a murder case, talking about a murder weapon.
No.
You would expect the Quantico people and you and everybody else to examine this bottle from top to bottom for fingerprints, for DNA, for any sign of connection between this bottle and this person, my client. Do you have any scientific evidence or any evidence that this is the bottle that caused the death, on the substance that caused the death of Michael Cochran?
No, not this particular bottle. I can't say either way, if it is or it isn't.
Okay, if I may retrieve the exhibit.
Very well.
Can you get insulin over the counter?
I really don't know. I've heard conflicting answers on that.
Okay. Can a pharmacist get insulin over the counter, or if she's planning a murder with insulin, can we maybe like take some from the supplies of the pharmacy where she's working?
We speaking hypothetically?
Well, let's say can a pharmacist have access to insulin?
I would imagine a pharmacist can if they're dispensing it, yes.
Okay. And if somebody wants to use insulin as a murder weapon, they can obtain it without any major suspicion or any major problems.
As long as they are actually employed as a pharmacist and actively working as a pharmacist.
Or if they know people in the pharmacy business, and maybe they can get some on the sly, right?
I would hope not, but I guess it's possible.
And they may not necessarily need to ask the neighbor for the insulin, that they can get themselves over the counter.
I can't answer that question.
Do you know what kind of insulin you can get over the counter?
No, sir.
Okay. Wouldn't that be one of your basic questions before you accused my client of murdering Mr. Cochran with insulin?
Your client told me that she could buy insulin over the counter in one of the interviews that I did with her.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have of this witness.
All right, redirect.
Lieutenant Bledsoe, you have experience working in federal court, right?
Yes.
So you're familiar with the topic of unindicted co-conspirators?
Yes.
So if you believe that Michael was involved, could you have pursued conspiracy charges against Ms. Cochran?
Could you rephrase that? Or repeat that, I'm sorry.
If you believed that Michael was involved in the federal charges, could you have pursued conspiracy charges against Mrs. Cochran?
Yes.
But you did not do that, correct?
No, we did not.
The properties that were named in the forfeiture were owned by both of the Cochrans when Michael was alive, right?
Correct.
And we've seen that Michael's name was on all of the various bank accounts of the two companies. Does this tell you what he did or didn't know about the businesses at all?
No.
So the checks that you've seen that Michael wrote total a couple $1,000s, is that right?
I believe so. I believe that sounds accurate.
How much money passed through TSG total?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, I would ask for this document to be marked as the state's next exhibit.
All right,
Number 28 for the state, Your Honor.
thank you.
Now, defense counsel told you that the Bank of America account was never opened, is that right?
That's correct.
What does this check tell you?
That it's a check printed with Bank of America, an account number on the bottom, Tactical Solutions Group LLC, and it appears to be a check that was written for deposit only to another account.
But it is the Bank of America check?
It is, yes.
Now, during your investigation, you saw a text between the defendant and Michael Cochran during the time that he allegedly had her phone, is that right?
Yes.
Can you tell me what New Profit Source is? From your understanding?
It was included I believe, either on the bottle of enclomiphene or on orders that I saw for the bottles of enclomiphene.
Your Honor, I'd ask that this be marked as the state's next exhibit.
Exhibit number 29, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Now, Lieutenant Bledsoe, is that your email signature at the top of the page?
Yes, it is.
Was this email sent to you?
It was.
And who was it sent from?
It was sent from the defendant.
And what does that tell you about who between the Cochrans was interacting with whose target source?
I'm going to object. This message doesn't tell him anything.
I think you have to sustain the objection. You could rephrase Ms. Avery.
This is further down on the same email. So I'm sorry. This was forwarded, right?
Yes.
That's the top of the page. Does this tell you who was attempting to order the enclomiphene?
Yes, the defendant.
Thank you. Are you at all familiar with insulin needles?
No.
So you wouldn't know about the size of that needle at all, right?
No.
Now, I know the defense counsel repeatedly asked you for direct evidence of our murder investigation, which we have repeatedly stated that we don't have, right?
Correct.
What circumstantial evidence led you to charge the defendant with murder?
I'm going to object as asked and answered at least twice.
I don't believe it has been, Your Honor.
Overruled. Okay.
What circumstantial evidence do you have that led you to believe the defendant committed the murder of Michael Cochran?
The actions of Michael Cochran and the text messages between Michael Cochran and the defendant.
And it was your testimony earlier that the defendant, in fact, told you that Michael was, quote, doing the best he's ever done in his life. Is that right?
That's correct.
The morning of February 6th, did Natalie purport to get both herself and Michael medications?
She did.
And just for clarification, who's that text message from?
It's from the defendant to Michael Cochran.
And lastly, was Natalie Cochran employed as a pharmacist at the time of Michael's death?
No, she was not.
And I'm sorry, Your Honor, I'd like to have this exhibit marked. State exhibit number 30. Your Honor, this time I would ask that state exhibits 28, 29, and 30 be entered into evidence.
Any objection?
I object to the exhibit previously mentioned. I don't know what the number is. 28,
For the reasons stated.
for the reason stated at the bench
All right.
conference.
I'm going to admit 28, 29, and 30. 28 over the defense objection, but I'll reserve acceptance.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
All right, recross Mr. Victor.
May I see 28, please? I'll hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 28 and tell the jury what it is.
It appears to be copies of checks that were written on an account at Bank of America for the Business Tactical Solutions Group, LLC.
Would you tell the jury if there are any checks written while Michael Cochran was alive?
Give me just a second to review. I don't see any, no, sir.
So after Michael Cochran's death, would it be fair to say that the defendant opened the account and wrote the checks on it as part of her fraud?
No.
No? Show me the evidence
if you can, that my client opened that account prior to February 5th or 6th, the flight to Lynchburg, Virginia. Show me any evidence that she opened that account prior to that date.
During my interview with Mr. Nexon, that was what I understood him to relay to me, was that she had contacted their bank, the defendant had contacted their bank for the purpose of opening an account.
Yeah, for the purposes of opening that account, I didn't ask you what the purpose was. I asked you whether they had an account open prior to February 6th of 2019.
I can't say if that account was open prior to that date or not.
And in fact, they were going there they were supposed to go there on the 6th to open the account because the banker, as he testified, needed their signatures, right?
I do recall him saying he needed their signatures, yes.
Well, then why are we beating around the bush? As far as you know, before the February 6th, 2019, that account wasn't open. That account was open later, after Michael's death.
I don't know that.
You don't know that. Prosecutor asked you whether my client signing the checks told you anything about Michael Cochran knowing or not knowing anything about his business. Is that a fair paraphrase of her question?
I'm going to answer that. I'm just trying to make sure that I understand it, and I don't know if you could repeat it for me.
There was a question whether Michael knew anything about her business based on these checks, and you said you couldn't tell, right?
Yes.
So just because my client signed business checks after he died, because obviously he couldn't sign any more checks, that doesn't tell you what he knew or had known or didn't know or hadn't known about the business.
That was the whole purpose for his planned meeting at the Bank of America on the 6th,
Right.
was to find out.
So the answer would be yes.
No, my answer is what I answered.
And you said that you had no knowledge of nootropics?
No, sir, I didn't say that.
What did you say?
I said I recalled the term or the word from either the bottle of clomiphene or documentation related to the order, which I have seen since. So it was one or the other, but I did recall that word. I just couldn't exactly remember exactly where.
And you testified on redirect that the messages between my client and her husband are circumstantial proof of her murdering Michael Cochran. Is that what you said?
I said his actions and the text messages, yes.
Actions and the text messages are circumstantial proof that she killed Mr. Cochran.
They're circumstantial and go towards that proof, yes.
Going towards the proof, or are they the proof?
Yes, they're the proof.
They're the proof. Show me the message that you claim is the proof of circumstantial evidence of my client killing Michael Cochran. Show me the one. Show the jury the one.
There's hundreds of them.
Hundreds of them.
Yes.
Well, show me number one.
I don't have them in front of me to show you.
Well, show me number two.
I don't have them here with me.
You're speculating, officer. All right, that's all I have. Withdrawn.
All right, it is withdrawn. Anything further, Ms. Akard?
Just very briefly, Your Honor. Your Honor, I would ask this be marked as the state's next exhibit. It has been shown to defense counsel.
Very well.
31 for the second one.
Thanks.
Lieutenant Bledsoe, what are the dates on this account summary from Bank of America?
It says for January 30th, 2019 to January 31st, 2019.
And what day did Michael Cochran die?
February the 11th, 2019.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Your Honor. I would ask that this be moved into evidence.
No objection.
All right, it will be admitted into evidence. Anything further, Ms. Aker?
No, Your Honor.
Mr. Victor?
Is it true, sir, that the bank will not open an account unless it has the wet signature of each and every signatory of the account?
Objection, Your Honor. That question should have been posed of the banker that testified. This witness has no way to answer that question.
Sustained.
All right? Did you hear the banker testifying to that effect?
No, I don't
Okay?
recall that.
Wasn't that the purpose of Mr. and Mrs. Cochran going to that bank in Virginia to sign off on that account, to open it formally by giving their signatures, putting their signatures to the opening documents of that account?
Mr. Cochran had been told that he was going to be receiving $1.4 billion into that account, and he wanted to make sure.
Yes or no? It wasn't that the point of their trip to,
No, I don't believe it was.
you don't believe it was? That's all.
Anything further, Ms. Aker?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down, sir. Thank you.